The massive Galactic Council chamber buzzed with anticipation. Representatives from countless species across the stars gathered in the towering amphitheater, their holographic translators humming softly. At the center stood the Thalxian war commander, Lord Virak, an imposing figure with dark, chitinous armor that shimmered in the chamber's light. His voice echoed through the hall, dripping with disdain. "Why are the humans even here?" Virak scoffed, his mandibles clicking. "What do these primitive beings know of war?" The assembled delegates murmured in agreement. Humanity, after all, had only recently emerged onto the galactic stage, while the Thalxians had ruled entire sectors. With their unmatched technology and war prowess, humans were seen as barely more than an evolutionary curiosity, a species that had only just figured out faster-than-light travel and had no significant military assets to speak of. On the other side of the chamber stood Captain Maria Ras, representative of Earth, clad in a simple, olive-green military uniform, with no technological enhancements or elaborate insignia. She looked out of place amongst the towering figures, many of whom had centuries of experience in the galaxy's warfare. She was smaller, unaugmented by cybernetics, and seemingly frail compared to the other species. Her arms rested calmly behind her back, her face a mask of calm indifference. Thalxian advisors leaned in close to Lord Virak, whispering, "Should we not reconsider? The humans have certain records that suggest they may." "Nonsense," Virak interrupted, his tone brimming with arrogance. "They are but insects beneath our boots. Their entire history is filled with squabbles over mud and stone. They have nothing to offer the galaxy in this time of war." Captain Ross stepped forward then, her boots clicking against the smooth floor, her voice cutting through the murmurs like a blade. "You misunderstand humanity, Commander Virak." All eyes turned toward her. The Thalxian commander chuckled, crossing his arms. "Enlighten us, then, human. What do you know of war?" Ross held his gaze, unflinching, more than you could ever imagine. With a sharp gesture, she activated the holographic display behind her. Images appeared, rotating slowly. Battles fought in trenches of blood-soaked earth, skies blackened by smoke and fire, soldiers marching through mud, and desolation. The images shifted to atomic clouds rising over cities, fleets of ships battling in the void, and soldiers engaging in brutal hand-to-hand combat on alien worlds. "This is Earth's history of war," Russ said, her voice unwavering. "For millennia, we have fought amongst ourselves, with no regard for limits. From sticks and stones to nuclear fire, we have mastered every form of conflict. Our wars have been devastating, brutal, and total. Each time, we push ourselves beyond the brink, thinking it is the end. And yet we return stronger, more determined. We do not require advanced technology to know war. War is in our bones." The Thalxians shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't what they had expected. They had assumed that their superior technology made them the masters of war. But there was something primal in the way the humans spoke, something ancient and dangerous. Lord Virak sneered. "But you lack the technology to stand against us. You cannot." "Technology?" Ross cut in, her voice cold. "We learned it long ago that technology is just a tool. It can be broken, it can be hacked, it can be stolen. But the will to survive, the instinct to adapt, those are what make us unbeatable." The hologram changed again, showing a video of human soldiers in a jungle, clad in camouflage, using their environment as cover. It showed guerrilla fighters using crude explosives to take down armored vehicles. It displayed ancient human war leaders, directing battles from the ground, employing strategies that turned the tide of impossible odds. "We fought wars where our enemy had superior numbers, superior firepower, and superior technology," Ross continued, her eyes locked on Virak's. "And yet, here we stand. Do not mistake our lack of fancy ships or shiny weapons for weakness. We know war. We have mastered war." Virak's smug confidence faltered. He hadn't expected this. His advisors shifted uneasily. The other species in the room, many of whom had also dismissed humanity as inconsequential, now exchanged uneasy glances. There was a fire in the humans' eyes that they hadn't seen before. "You fight with honor, with rules, with constraints," Russ said, stepping closer to the center of the room. Humans fight with desperation, we fight with everything we have, and when that fails, we fight with our bare hands and our teeth. We're not bound by your notions of what war should be. We are bound only by survival. The chamber fell into silence. The sheer weight of her words hung in the air. And when this galaxy-wide war reaches its tipping point, Ross concluded, her voice like iron, it will not be the species with the most advanced technology that wins. It will be the species that refuses to die. The Thalxian commander clenched his mandibles, realizing that he had misjudged these humans. Perhaps they were not as primitive as they seemed. Perhaps, in their simplicity, there was a dangerous edge that no one had accounted for. Ross gave him a final, cold stare. So, Commander Virak, I ask you again, what do the humans know of war? Without waiting for a response, she turned on her heel and walked out of the chamber, leaving behind a room full of species now reconsidering the humans not as primitives, but as survivors. And survivors, they all knew, were the most dangerous kind of warriors. The council chamber remained in stunned silence long after Captain Maria Ross left. The display of humanity's brutal and relentless history of warfare echoed in the minds of the delegates, and the Thalxians, once so confident in their military superiority, were now uneasy. Lord Virak, still standing at the center of the room, stared at the now empty door where Ross had exited. What just happened? One of his advisors muttered, barely audible. She's bluffing, Virak snapped, his voice carrying less certainty than before. They're primitive, backward creatures. They can't. Can't what? A gravelly voice interrupted from behind. The speaker was General Karkish of the Braxter, a grizzled warrior species known for their brutal conquest of their neighboring star systems. Karkish stepped forward, his towering, muscular form casting a shadow over the council. He had seen his fair share of battle, but something in Ra's speech had resonated with him. You know nothing of them, Karkish continued, his yellow eyes narrowing at Virak. You dismiss them without thought, assuming their low technology makes them weak. But I've fought against species like them before, ones that fight not for glory or conquest, but because they must, and those are the hardest to defeat. Virak glared at the Braxter general. Are you suggesting we should fear these humans? Karkish grunted. Fair, no, respect, yes. The chamber began to stir again, as other delegates quietly discussed among themselves. For the first time, there was serious consideration of Earth's place in this conflict. Word of the galactic war had spread quickly, and each species was calculating their moves, trying to determine who would emerge victorious. Up until now, humans had barely been part of that equation. Virak, though, was still struggling to regain control of the conversation. Their technology is centuries behind ours. They are barely beyond their own moon. How can they possibly be a threat? A voice, cold and calculated, cut through the air, because war is not about technology alone. It was the Edner delegate, a species known for their advanced strategic intellect and emotionless demeanor. Their war strategies were legendary. Their victories achieved not by brute strength but through cold, calculated precision. The Edners stood with their hands behind their back, their metallic skin shimmering in the light. The human captain made a point that you missed, Commander Virak, the Edner said, their expression unreadable. War is about survival. The wood to endure. Technology is only one factor in that equation. If humans have survived countless conflicts and risen from the ashes, that is not something to dismiss lightly. Virak's mandibles clicked with frustration. And what do you propose we do? Form an alliance with them? Integrate their primitive tactics into our war efforts? No, the Edner replied, their voice calm. But we should observe them, learn from them. They have experience in the kind of war that our species have not faced in centuries, a war of attrition, of resilience. We might need them more than we realize. The thought hung in the air, unsettling many of the delegates. The idea of depending on humanity, a species they had long considered insignificant, was difficult to grasp. But as the minutes passed, more and more of the council realized that perhaps underestimating these humans was a mistake. One delegate, a reptilian figure from the Jared Collective, spoke up. Humans, they don't fight the way we do. with honor, with codes. They fight dirty. They turn their environments into weapons. They sacrifice entire cities to gain an advantage. They are ruthless. Karkish nodded. Exactly. In a galactic war, where every species is playing by the same rulebook, the ones who break the rules are often the most dangerous. If we continue to treat this war like a game of chess, the humans would treat it like a fistfight in the mud. Lord Virak bristled at the notion, his pride too wounded to admit defeat, but he couldn't deny that the room had turned against him. Fine, if you believe they're such a great asset, let them prove it. Send them into the warfront. Let's see if their survival instincts are enough to turn the tide. The suggestion was meant as a sneer, a dismissal, but it was met with murmurs of agreement. Several delegates nodded thoughtfully, considering the possibilities. Perhaps it was time to test these humans, not in the controlled environment of a council debate, but in the chaos of the battlefield. Before any formal decision could be made, the doors to the council chamber opened again. All eyes turned toward the entrance. Captain Ross returned, this time accompanied by a small group of human soldiers, each of them standing straight-backed, their faces hard with determination. There were no ornate uniforms, no shining armor, just simple, practical combat gear worn, battle-tested. Ross approached the center of the room once more, meeting Virak's gaze without fear. "You wanted to know what we humans know of war, Commander," she said, her voice steady. "Allow us to show you." The room fell silent again, as the implications of her words sank in. This was no longer a discussion. This was a challenge. Ross turned her attention to the rest of the council. "We don't need your technology. We don't need your advanced weapons. We need the opportunity to fight, and you'll see what humans are truly capable of. Send us to the front. Let us show you how we fight and how we win." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Karkish stepped forward, his voice a low growl. "I will support this. Send the humans to the front. Let them prove their mettle in battle." One by one, other delegates began to voice their agreement. Even the Anner gave a small nod, their expression betraying nothing, but their approval evident. Virak, cornered and frustrated, had no choice but to relent. "Very well," he spat. "The humans will fight. Let's see if your species truly knows war, Captain Ross." Ross simply smiled, the kind of smile that promised a reckoning. "We'll show you," she said softly. "We'll show you what low-tech humans know of war." As the council began to disperse, whispers of humanity's potential spread through the chamber. They had been dismissed as insignificant before, but now the galaxy was watching, and soon they would learn humans were not just survivors, they were warriors. The battlefront stretched for miles, a desolate wasteland of charred craters and scorched earth. The air crackled with the distant hum of energy weapons, and the sky was a swirling canvas of smoke and dust. Alien ships hovered overhead, their sleek forms casting long shadows over the battlefield, and trenches lined with soldiers from every corner of the galaxy crisscrossed the land. At the heart of this war zone, on a barren ridge overlooking the front lines, Captain Maria Ross stood with her squad of human soldiers. They were vastly outnumbered, but their expressions were hard, their eyes scanning the battlefield with the practiced intensity of those who had seen countless conflicts before. They had been deployed to one of the most dangerous sectors of the Wara region, where the Thausians, once so confident in their superiority, were struggling to hold their ground. Behind Ross, her second-in-command, Sergeant Mark Lewis, crouched next to a crude tactical display. Unlike the holographic maps and advanced war interfaces of other species, this was a simple, hand-drawn map on a tattered piece of paper, marked with red circles and X's. It was low-tech, like everything else the humans had brought with them, but it was effective. "They're holding the ridge with heavy artillery," Lewis said, pointing to the map. "Thalxian ground troops are dug in deep. If we hit them head-on, we'll be annihilated before we get within 50 meters. Ross nodded. "We won't hit them head-on. We'll flank them." Lewis raised an eyebrow. "Flank them? With what? We barely have any vehicles, and their detection systems will pick us up the second we move." Ross smirked. "That's the thing about advanced tech. It's predictable. They're expecting us to come at them with something flashy, something that pings on their sensors, but we're going to do the opposite." She turned to her squad, her voice calm but commanding. We move low, use the terrain. We blend into the environment. They won't even know we're there until we're right on top of them. A few soldiers exchanged glances, the idea sounding like pure madness given the circumstances, but they trusted Russ. She'd let them through worse odds before. You really think this'll work? Private Dawson, the youngest member of the squad, asked nervously. Russ knelt down beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. It'll work. We've faced tougher enemies than the Falchians, and remember, we're not here to fight by their rules. We're here to win. Dawson nodded, reassured by her confidence. The squad prepared, adjusting their gear simple, rugged equipment that didn't rely on fancy electronics or advanced targeting systems. The weapons they carried were ballistic rifles, outdated by galactic standards, but effective in the right hands, and in human hands, they were lethal. As they moved out, the soldiers crawled through the dirt and debris, their uniforms blending into the scorched landscape. They moved silently, using the natural cover provided by the craters and wreckage from previous battles. Ross led the way, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. Hours passed, and the Falchians above continued to rain down artillery on the distant front lines, unaware that a small group of humans was closing in on their position. The Falchians were heavily reliant on their technology to spot and destroy threats before they even arrived, and the humans were exploiting their reliance. When they reached the base of the ridge, Ross signaled her squad to stop. From their position, they could see the Falxian encampment, a heavily fortified bunker, with automated turrets and shield generators humming with energy. Ross studied it carefully, noting the positions of the guards and the patterns of movement. Now comes the fun part, she whispered to Lewis, who had crawled up beside her. We need to disable their artillery and shields before they realize what's happening. Lewis grinned. And how exactly are we supposed to do that? Ross pulled a small device from her pack, something that looked like an old radio transmitter. We jam their comms, take out the guard towers quietly, then we use good old-fashioned explosives to handle the rest. Explosives? Lewis asked, eyebrow raised. We barely have any left. Enough to make an impact, she replied with a wink. The plan went into motion. Private Dawson and another soldier, Corporal Vasquez, circled around the ridge to take out the sentries, armed with nothing more than knives and silenced pistols. They moved like shadows in the night. Within minutes, the guards were down, and the humans had control of the ridge's outer defenses without a single shot fired. Meanwhile, Russ set up the jamming device. The Falxian communications crackled and died, leaving them blind and deaf to what was about to happen. The human squad advanced further into the encampment, using the cover of darkness and the chaos of their disabled systems to plant charges around the artillery and shield generators. It wasn't long before the Falchians realized something was wrong. An alarm blared, and soldiers began pouring out of the bunkers, weapons drawn and ready for combat. But by then, it was too late. Ross gave the signal, and the charges detonated in a brilliant series of explosions that rocked the entire ridge. The Falchians scrambled to respond, but their defenses were down, and their artillery had been obliterated. What followed was a brutal, close-quarters battle. The Falchians, armed with their advanced energy rifles, were caught off guard by the human assault. The humans fought with a savage efficiency, moving from cover to cover, picking off the alien soldiers with precision fire. The battlefield descended into chaos. Falchians fell one by one, unable to adapt to the unpredictable, guerrilla-style tactics the humans employed. It wasn't the clean, organized warfare they were used to. It was dirty, it was ruthless, and it was devastating. Within an hour, the humans had taken control of the ridge. As the dust settled and the last of the Falxian forces were either dead or retreating, Ross and her squad regrouped. They were battered and bruised, but victorious. Sergeant Lewis let out a low whistle as he looked over the carnage. Well, I'll be damned. We actually pulled it off. Ross smiled faintly, wiping the dirt from her face. Never underestimate the power of simplicity. Lewis,